don't know about you, but that last Glenfiddich orchard experiment, it kind of reminded me of something. This is the Compass Box Orchard House. So comparing these two, obviously the colour schemes are very similar. Orchard Experiment, Orchard House. Even the tube on the Glenfiddich, it kind of looks like an enlarged out of focus variation of the label on the Orchard House. Very similar colour themes. Even the names are very, very close. Obviously nobody owns the patent, the copyright on the idea of orchard fruits and appley pear notes in whiskey, but I think it's safe to say that there's probably been a little bit of inspiration taken somewhere here. So I thought it would be a good time, because I haven't reviewed any Compass Box whiskey yet. I thought it would be a good time to take a look at the Compass Box Orchard House, see how it compares to the Glenfiddich Orchard Experiment, and see if it's any good. It is worth pointing out though that whereas this one, it's one of many of these Calvados cask finished or Calvados-esque cask type whiskies that we're seeing now, that the SWA has made them allowed to be advertised as Scotch whisky. We're seeing a lot of these come out. This one is not in any way Calvados cask influenced. It's actually not a finished whisky at all. I actually find it surprising to myself that this is the first Compass Box whisky that I've reviewed, because they are kind of the darlings of the whisky community. I think that Compass Box, they are loved by many. Me personally, I like them. I love their advocacy, especially for transparency. I really like their innovation and their honest products. I think that sometimes they're very overpriced at the top end of their range, but they're almost always interesting, usually worth buying. And to be fair, this one here is not overpriced. You can get this one for about £40. So what do we know about this whisky? It's a blended malt, it's non-chill filtered, it's natural colour, it's 46%, no age statement. But saying that, we do have a really good idea of what goes into this blended malt. There's a fact sheet on the Compass Box website that details not only the first batch, but the second batch where they tweak the recipe slightly. And that fact sheet tells us that this is a blend of largely linkwood. There's some Clynelish in there, there's some Benrinus, there's a smaller amount of Kalila, there's an even smaller amount of what they call Highland Malt Blend, which they even go down to breaking that down for us by telling us there's some Balmenic in there, some Glenmurray and some Tomatin. And also this one cracks me up a little bit. There's a component in the blend which they describe as whiskey from a distillery near Aberlour. Which sounds obvious what they're getting at, but it's not actually as easy to figure out as you think, because there are a lot of distilleries near Aberlour. But I think with that wording that they've chosen, I'd be really surprised if it's not the one that you and I are thinking of. We know that a lot of the whisky that goes into this is first fill bourbon casks. We also know, and I really like this, they've told us that a lot of the whisky that goes into this isn't actually bought as mature whisky, it's bought from the distilleries as new make spirit, and it's actually matured in casks by Compass Box themselves. It's also interesting that if you look at their fact sheets, they're saying that the Clynelish whisky that goes into this, it's said to contribute notes of apple, wax and honey. So from that we can probably infer that that Clynelish is an unpeated Clynelish. And having tasted this already, getting towards the halfway point on this one, I'd say that it definitely tastes like it's an unpeated Clynelish. Especially considering that the Clynelish that goes into this makes up a fairly large percentage of the bottle, and there's basically little to no smoke at all. It is interesting that the Kalila portion of what goes into this, it does say that one of the flavours that contributes is smoke. So very likely to be peated Kalila going into this, but it's a really, really small percentage. It's actually around 2%. So out of this 700ml bottle, you're actually getting less than half a single measure of that peated Kalila going into this. So in my humble opinion, it's borderline as to whether you're actually going to notice that, unless you're specifically looking for it perhaps. Now, I did say that this is a no age statement whisky, and we don't have any explicit info on the ages or vintages of what goes into this. Compass Box used to be really amazing with their fact sheets that actually tell you the percentage of which distillery goes in, and they'd be open with all the distillery names. There wouldn't be any cryptic guesswork like a town near Aberlour like there is on this one now. And they would actually tell you what year those casks were distilled and how old each component of the whisky was. Sadly, Compass Box have kind of had their hand forced, and they've had to take the actual mention of ages of casks and years of distillation off of their fact sheet, although that info is out there on websites like Whisky Base. And I'll also point out that if you're not familiar with Compass Box cask breakdown diagrams, if you have a look at their fact sheet, if you're interested in trying this one, each component in the blend in their cask breakdown, it has a varying amount of rings extending out towards the outside of the circular sort of pie chart diagram. And if you count those rings for each component, they vary between kind of 6 to 10 rings depending on which component of the blend it is. A lot of you will be aware that the reason why we've got this ridiculous situation where information's been taken off the fact sheet and we're being told less information, we're getting less transparency, is because in the debate between Compass Box and the SWA a few years ago on whether or not the full transparency offered by Compass Box counts as being misleading about age statements under the Scotch Whisky Regulations 2009, as an anonymous complainant to the SWA argued, the SWA said, well, you make a good point, but we're going to side with the company that's run by one of our own board members. Who would have thought? So in the interests of not being misleading, we don't have any explicit info from Compass Box on this one, on the age of any part of this whisky, so we either have to guess or go around with a magnifying glass counting rings on a diagram, or trust what somebody says on a forum. So yeah, good job. Anyway, that's enough complaining for one day. Let's get some in the glass, see what we've got. Obviously, cork enclosure, fairly decent cork. I'll also point out that if you look at the bottom of the bottle in this one, and I haven't had this for very long at all, and it's a fairly recent batch, it's one of the newer ones, it's actually batch code L291021, which is one of the newer ones as of 2022. But if you look on the bottom floor of the bottle, that's not a mark on the bottom of the bottle, that's actually a little bit of barrel char that's settled on the bottom of the glass, which obviously is not a bad thing. That's proof that this is a non-chill filtered whisky and it's a sign of quality. So yeah, interesting, good. Let's get rid of that, let's get that out of the way. That's kind of better. Okay, Compass Box Orchard House, not Orchard Experiment, don't get those confused, on the nose. So, first tasting note here, can you guess what I'm going to say? All together now, 3, 2, 1, apples. I don't think that surprised anyone. Lots and lots of really nice, fresh, juicy apples. I would say mostly red apples, but also quite a lot of those juicy, sharp green apples too. It's also quite a fresh kind of green grape note and a little bit of a Chardonnay note. So an ever so slightly sharp and tart grape white wine note. So I'd say this could be a really good whisky for any wine drinkers out there who are thinking of branching out into whisky. It's also a nice mineral quality to this, quite a dusty gravel note. Getting some really nice sweet bright pears, some nice honey and vanilla, and a really nice background dry maltiness on the nose. So Compass Box Orchard House, orchard being the operative term, I'd say does exactly what it says on the tin. So Compass Box Orchard House, let's see how it tastes. Lovely pale colour on that one. And if you add water to this, as they say it is non-chill filtered, you do get a really nice Scotch mist on this one. So on the palate, again, apples, 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 apples. Getting some really nice sharp and sweet, intense appley notes, a nice oaky edge. Actually unexpectedly slightly more youthful than the nose. You can tell that this is not an old whiskey. It's young and feisty and fresh and juicy. It's not an old whiskey, but that's okay. Towards the end of the palate, I'm getting some nice dry muesli type barley notes. On the finish, I'm going to say medium long, moving from fruit to some drier malted barley notes. As for a grade for this one, really pleased to say that I'm going to give this a B. So that's bang in the middle of what I would call very good. I think that this Compass Box Orchard House, it's really good value for money. I think at £40, I think this is worth every penny. I think that it's reasonably young, but old enough. I think that it's a little bit simple, but complex enough. I think that it's a little bit light, but at 46% it's okay and powerful enough. I think that it's a very well made and good value blended malt that shows just how much you can do just with some good bourbon casks and barley. And also, in a way, I think it shows you kind of how unnecessary Calvados casks are. If they had used Calvados casks to mature or finish this, yeah, it would be a different whiskey. Would it be better? Probably not. And I think the amount of appley notes, those orchard apple and pear notes, and sweetness that you're getting on this one without having to use Calvados casks, it does seriously make me wonder how necessary Calvados casks are when you can do this without them. So yeah, a great blended malt from Compass Box. I'm really glad that I bought this one, and hopefully it won't be the last Compass Box whiskey that I get around to reviewing. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and make sure that you check out John's review of Compass Box Orchard House at Just Whisky on YouTube. He's done a great video about this one and he really knows what he's talking about. And also check out the really good video by Trenny and C on what's the best Compass Box whiskey. They do a really great video between the two of them where they compare this Orchard House to 3 other, I think they're all reasonably priced, modern Compass Box offerings that should be available now. So thanks for watching, I'll see you next time, cheers.